we get started, if you want to take your Bibles and go to Proverbs chapter 1, that's where we'll start. And I may have been in the first part of this chapter once before, a couple times back when I spoke. I'd mentioned back early in 2020. 2020 was an odd year. Lots of strange things happened. Amongst others, my computer died. And so if I did use this previously, again, going a different direction tonight anyhow, but I wouldn't know because all the notes were gone now. So just mention that. This is a little bit different than what I normally do as far as message design and layout and everything else in a variety of ways. Usually, now with Sunday school, using the curriculum from Answers in Genesis, I don't do it, but those who have been either here or elsewhere where I've taught Sunday school, I usually practically every week have a handout. No handout tonight. Screens are dark, no slides tonight. Usually I have PowerPoint and all. I've got a clicker, it just won't do anything. Things like that. The Bible software I've been using for, 15, 20 years, probably more, was purchased by another company, and so it's a whole redesign now. And so typically the way I set up my notes, it's 2.5, 3 pages maybe. It's 6.5, 7 pages this time. No more information. It's just, again, different than what I'm accustomed to. And yet we're still looking at the same Bible, talking about the same God. Unfortunately, dealing with the same life around us. And so we'll look at the Word of God tonight and draw from that. We're going to look at the entirety of Proverbs chapter 1. A lot of times, having been in education, a lot of times we focus on those first 6, 7, maybe 8 or 9 verses and stop there. But we're going to just look at the entire chapter tonight. And it's kind of interesting. I'm not 100% sure what piqued my interest in going to this for the message tonight. It could have been the last couple of Sunday nights, Pastor talked on parenting and things like that. Could have been that. I'm not sure what pointed me in this direction, but this is where God's placed me, and so this is where we'll spend some time tonight. The title that I have, I was telling Pastor right before we started, is Instruction to Live By. A better title would be Meditations and Mullings on Proverbs 1, because that's really all it is. A lot of times if I'm putting together a message, I've got lots of cross-references, looking at different passages. I may mention 1 or 2 tonight, but basically we're going to stay right here. Stay right here within these 30-plus verses and see what Solomon has for us tonight. And so let's look at some instruction to live by. First of all, let's read Proverbs 1, 1 through 6. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. So we know right off the top who's writing this. There are a couple books in the Bible that there's some question about who the author was. There's one particular book that there's some debate about who the author was. There's no question whether you want to call him the author, editor, or compiler. There's no question who is responsible for the book of Proverbs. He puts it right at the very top. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. In these first 6 verses, I have a title here, Goals of Biblical Instruction. As Solomon is teaching his son, he outlines, he lists, here's what I want to accomplish. And it's interesting as we look through this, and it's not the focus tonight, so I'm not going to look at each of the different words and define them, and if you have a study Bible, you can have it defined for you right now. But it's interesting, as we look at this and see these different qualities or characteristics here, what Solomon points out. The very first one there, to know wisdom and instruction. And it's interesting that that's first. And it's interesting the way he's got it worded here. To know wisdom and instruction. Well, It's not to hear it. It's not to be a partaker in it, but it's to know it, to understand it, to grasp it. And he uses that same thought as he goes through the remainder of this. The second one here, to perceive the words of understanding. Again, there's that idea of knowing or perceiving. To perceive the words of understanding. And we'll come to this again later, a couple times throughout this. But that idea, there are lots of words out there. Oh my. Back in the 90s, conservative talk radio was taking off. Or late 80s, early 90s. I mean, like 89, 90, 91. Right in that time frame is when Rush Limbaugh really was getting big. And then there are lots who have followed that. So you've got conservative talk radio taking off. And then we hit the 2000s, and everybody and their brother has a podcast now. There are lots of words out there. And notice what Solomon says. He doesn't say to perceive the words. He specifies what kind of words. Words of understanding. And there's that idea there that next we go to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. Again, that idea of receive that you're not just sitting here hearing. When I was teaching, a lot of times I would tell my students, hey, don't hear me, listen to me. Be actively engaged. We'll say that conversation is bi-directional. If I'm in a class and I'm talking, what's happening? Not much. But if somebody's listening, now you've got engagement. We've got this thing at FedEx. It's called 1 positive minute. I refer to it as 1 positive millisecond. But we are supposed to, each week, go to the people for whom we are direct reports and have them sign that we gave them something positive this week. And it's pretty easy to do. You write down their name and what they did, and you say, hey, could you sign this for me real quick? And you move on to the next person. Yeah. But the company initiative is to drive engagement. Well, engagement is necessary. It's something that we do. How do you develop relationships without engagement? And that's kind of what we see here. To receive the instruction, again, it's that receiving. You're engaged. The next one is kind of interesting, to get subtlety for the simple. It's interesting, not only the term subtlety, but subtlety for whom? Throughout most of the book of Proverbs, when the word simple is used, it's not a commendation. It's more of a condemnation. When the word simple is used, it's talking about the one who is naive, who just wanders blindly where he happens to land. And so basically what it's saying here is the one who is naive, we want to help him know where to take his steps. And then to get knowledge and discretion. And what kind of person is that for? Well, for the young man. Again, we just talked about the naive. For the young man, the one who is, he's not an infant, but he's still learning his way. And then in verse 6, he kind of ties it all together. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. And the note that I have there is, listen and learn. Solomon's talking, he's writing, he's making these notes. And I mentioned before in Sunday school class, there's zero, like big zero, question in my mind who Solomon had in mind as he's writing this, just because of life and the age. Rehoboam was the target. Listen and learn. I think he heard and disregarded. As we look at Scripture, we kind of see that. And then I told you, this is meditations and mullings, and so it's mulling time. Some notes on these 6 verses. First of all, it is of significant importance that we teach the next generation how to live. What's Pastor doing tonight? He's back there, working with the young people. It is of significance. It's not simply something that happens as a byproduct of life. It requires engagement. Looking at the wording that Solomon has here, now again, he did not write in King James English. He wrote in Hebrew, and it was an old Hebrew at that. But what we have here, looking at these words that we can read, being smart is good. Being wise is infinitely better. There are lots of smart people out there. It's always befuddled me, and I may have mentioned it in Sunday school classes before, but I'd talk about it often in doing parent interviews with prospective students in Christian schools I worked at. I said, it's always been befuddling to me. You can go to most prisons in the United States and find people who are incarcerated studying law. And I'm like, if the law was that important to them, why are they there to begin with? The problem isn't that they're not smart. The problem is that they weren't wise. Smart is good, but wisdom is better. These qualities that Solomon lists out here, they give a direction for life. Next that I have here, parents have an opportunity, better yet, we have a responsibility to properly train children. But it goes beyond that. As a church, we have an opportunity to invest our lives in the life of the young people back in the back of the fellowship hall, whether they're ours or not. The fact that your kids are grown and out of the house doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to help teach and train. If we wanted to jump into the New Testament and look at the Pauline epistles, did not Paul talk about the older training the younger? They had a responsibility, and we see that. And that's something that's missing today. It's missing in America. We have a generation who is so smart they don't need to be taught anymore. And even if you wanted to teach them, they're not going to listen. Well, where did that start? Maybe with their parents, who listened and then they did the buffet and decided to pick and choose what they wanted to hear. And so, we have a responsibility to teach and train, and it's not just training our kids, it's training the kids that God brings across our path. Now, as we're teaching and training, we need to teach what is right and what is wrong. We need to teach discernment. We need to teach the children right and wrong, and then teach them how to choose between right and wrong, and teach them that it's always better to choose right. If you believe in, let me simply say, biblical discipline, the idea, there's a difference between discipline and punishment. Punishment is, this is because of what you just did. Discipline is so that you become smart enough not to do it again. And the idea that I want to work with my kids is, hey, I want you to understand that sin hurts. Amen. Because if I understand that sin hurts, guess what I will try to avoid? Sin. Even if it's only because I want to avoid the hurt. If I avoid the hurt by avoiding the sin, I've come out ahead. We have to teach what's right and wrong. Now, in order to accomplish that, again, we're just on 6 verses so far. To accomplish that, we need to guard who and what these children are listening to. Ooh, and that is a challenge today. Back in 1994, maybe I bought my first computer. And it was so useless. Useless by today's world. There are in the auditorium tonight, there are smartphones and dumb phones. If you have a dumb phone that's smarter than my computer was back in 1994. If I'm not mistaken, back then it had 256 meg, and that had a pretty decent sized hard drive at that point. You say, well, I don't know what a meg is. Don't worry about it, not a big deal. Just know that there's not a program out there today that computer would run. Now, it just won't happen. The phone that you have in your hand is significantly more powerful than my computer was. And the phone that your kids have in their hands is significantly better. Now think back to when you first got email. How many of you had dial-up modems and had to listen to it screech as it tried to connect? And now they can access anybody and everybody in the whole wide world from the palm of their hand. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. The pastor talked about that a couple of weeks ago. What I'm saying is we need to do our best to guard who and what our kids take in. I'll back up. We need to guard who and what we take in. Because we're susceptible to the same things. And so we need to put quality instructors, quality media, quality materials, quality tools. We need to put quality before our young people and before ourselves. If you're working on a project and you need a new tool in order to accomplish this project, you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get Craftsman or Cobalt or whatever, or you can go to Harbor Freight. If you've got a limited budget, where are you headed to? Harbor Freight, because it'll last for this project. It might not make the next one, but it'll get you through this one. Am I right? But if you want it to last, what are you going to do? You're going to go find the name brand that carries a lifetime warranty. What's the difference? The quality of the workmanship. Well, we need to put the same effort into the quality of the materials and the methods, the people that we're listening to, the people that are teaching us, that are teaching our kids. And so we have a responsibility to put quality in front of our people, to teach and to train. This is our instruction. This is where we go. So how do we get to that point? Well, let's look, starting at verse 7 then. And really just the next couple of verses there, 7, 8, 9. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace upon thine head, and chains about thy neck. And we've heard this before. True wisdom begins with the fear of God. I need to have a healthy respect. I need to be afraid. I need to be deathly afraid. Jonathan Edwards, back during the time that we call the Second Great Awakening, or the Great Awakening, had his classic sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And multitudes were converted when they came to grips with the realization that they're in God's hand and he could just turn them over and drop them into the pit of hell. As they began to understand that God is in control. And as they developed a healthy fear of God, it changed lives. True wisdom begins with the fear of God. Now, it's interesting as we look at this, and even as I look at it now, I was reading it earlier in the week, throughout the week, looking at it now, even as I'm reading it to you, my mind is thinking, boy, let's watch the news and see the second half of verse 7. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. Hey, I know what I believe, and I'm not going to listen to you. Does that sound about right for what we see happening in the world around us? Now, God gives us instructors. God gives us teachers. Look at verse 8. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, forsake not the law of thy mother. God puts us in a home where we can have people to help us learn, but they can't make us learn. Back in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve reached for that fruit, could not God have reached out and slapped their hand? I mean, when you think about it, if he is an omnipresent God, was he not there when they took the fruit? So could he not have slapped their hand? What do you think you're doing? He could have, but he left them an option to obey or disobey. They chose wrongly. God provides instructors in the home, but we can't make our kids listen and learn. God provides parents, God provides aunts and uncles, friends and neighbors, God provides Sunday school teachers and preachers, and we can come to church and hear good preaching every week and walk out and do whatever we choose. But that's on us. God provides the instructors that we need. Think of all the protesters we've seen over this past year on the news as different protests have been taking place. How many of those protesters are college-age young adults, or just out of college, let's say, right there in that time frame? It's like, what are we doing? Do they have no purpose in life? There are a great many. They are off studying, they are learning, and they are learning how to change the world, but they have no idea what they're trying to change or how to change it. And as we try to fix, editorial we, as we try to fix all of America's problems, we're trying to do it without God. And trying to explain to somebody why they're wrong, even though we can't explain what's right. And that's not going to change anybody's mind, and it's definitely not going to change anybody's heart. And a God who demands his way or else does not fit into their worldview. A God who says, this is what you're supposed to do, and there's only one way to get to heaven, and my son is it. He doesn't fit into their way of thinking. And this all goes back to, we need those qualities that were listed in the first 6 verses. And then we need to listen and learn. as our young people have grown up and they have all this wealth of information around them, and they pick and choose who they're going to listen to, they're listening to the most exciting and the newest and the most novel and ignoring the things that are going to change hearts. And as the God of the Bible is rejected, wisdom is impossible. We've got an entire generation of really smart kids that are dumber than a box of rocks. Because they're smart. I mean, if you have problems with your DVD player at home, who do you get to fix it? Right? Get the kids to make those lights go out. They can fix it. But if you ask them, what's wrong with this or that, they don't have a clue. In fact, just 70 minutes ago, I was sitting at the island at the house looking at an email, and it had a news editorial. How many of you know who John Stossel is? John Stossel. He used to be on ABC News, and now he's got his own organization and all. He provides materials for teachers and stuff like that. Political view, probably libertarian, more conservative than liberal, but he had a letter to the editor that went across papers across the country talking about the real cost of socialism. And again, I think it's interesting because so many of our young people, they are enamored by socialism, even though they refuse to look and see that it's never worked. And it doesn't work because man's heart is depraved. But they don't want to understand that because, hey, this sounds really cool. I can get all this stuff for free. Hey, fantastic. I mean, I like free as much as the next guy. I'm all about it. I do not have a Costco membership because there's not one on this side, but if they're giving away free samples, I'm in line. I want to be a part of that. But when you stop and think of running an entire society that way, it just doesn't work. We've got an entire generation of young people that are really smart but dumb. And they don't want to listen, they refuse to be taught. Let's look at the next section here, beginning in verse 10. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, come with us, let us lay wait for blood, let us look privily for the innocent without cause, let us swallow them up alive as the grave, and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, walk not thou in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their paths. For their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. And they lay wait for their own blood. They look privily for their own lives. So are the ways of every one that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof. When I read this, was it Nancy Reagan who had, you know how the First Lady always has their crusade that they're on? Wasn't hers just say no to drugs or something like that? Okay, that's what I think of when I read this. Just say no. As we read this, we need to be able to say no. And some things that thinking of and notes I was putting down. Not everything that is enticing and alluring is good. I don't do any fishing up here. I grew up in Upper Michigan. Dad was the game warden. He spent a lot of his time talking to fishermen. We lived on the river, had a trout stream in the backyard, literally in the backyard. So I grew up fishing. If you're going fishing and you're using spoons and lures, what do you look for? The old dirty, dull one that doesn't do anything, or the one that's bright and shiny and grabs the attention of the fish? Well, the bright and shiny. And not everything that is enticing, not everything that is alluring is good. Not everything that is exciting is good. We live in a world that wants the next big thing. I can ride some roller coasters, but there's a lot of roller coasters I don't ride. I rode once, and that was enough for me. Out at Hershey Park, what was this? This was 20 years ago now. I rode the Great Bear once and was sick for 3 days. That was enough for me, no more. And it's an odd one. If I can sit in the car and the rails are below me, I'm good. If it's suspended, the physics, literally, I am down for days. Just because it's exciting doesn't mean it's a wise move for me. And you know what? There's a lot of things in life that are that way. Hey, this looks look at advertising on television. Well, the whole idea behind advertising is what? Hey, we've got this great brand new product and you need to get one because this toothbrush will change your life. I mean, and that's basically what they want, right? Not everything that is exciting or alluring is good. And as Solomon tells his son here, we need to be able to say no. Well, again, if we go to the Gospels this time, we find that there's this big, wide path that leads to destruction. And there's this narrow path that leads to life, and few there be that go in thereat. So do we want to go with the big crowd that's going to tumble off the cliff into destruction, or do we want to turn around and head the right way? And that's what we're dealing with. That's what we find. We need to be able to say no. And in order to do that, we need to live a principled life. We need to lead a life that says, I'm going to make decisions based upon the principles of God's Word. If it violates a command in God's Word, I'm going to say no. If it violates a principle of God's Word, I am going to say no. One sign of wisdom is discernment. Again, the ability to differentiate between good and bad and choose what's good. Wisdom is knowledge put into practice. Discernment is knowing what and how to do what you do. I don't have a lot of tools. I've got sufficient amount. But I've got tools in my, say, toolbox, tool bag, tool cabinet, tool, wherever the tool happens to be at this moment. If I needed to use it, I'd have to go to YouTube and figure out how. Because some of those tools in my hand would not be good. Some of you are laughing like you have to do this also. Mom and Dad still live in Upper Michigan. They've pretty much had a winter of no snow. They had some snow early, and then not much snow lately. Not much snow until 3 days ago. Now they have snow. And Dad's snowblower. Well, the snowblower works, but the chute is locked in place for some reason. And so he said, it's kind of hard if you have to keep blowing the snow the same direction. So he's like, I'm going to have to get, when I can get it in the garage, I'm going to have to get on YouTube and figure out how, and I thought it was interesting. Dad's not a young guy anymore. And he's going to have to get on YouTube to figure this out. Find a good teacher. Now stop and think. On YouTube, and he made this comment, I've got to find somebody that can explain it so I can understand it. You've got to find a good teacher, somebody that can help you. Because just having the information isn't any good if you can't understand it. Interesting note here. This is a deep theological statement. Are you ready for this? Don't be the bug flying around the lights. What do we do? If you go to, now when I go to the Senators games, well, they used to have games. Who knows if they'll ever have games again? In the land of COVID, who knows? But when I would go to the Senators baseball games, they always talk about the mayflies. I don't get there during mayfly season, but they talk about the mayflies. Where do you see the mayflies at? Up flying around the lights, because that which is alluring is a great thing, right? And what do you see at the bottom of the light pole? Those that got too close to the light. Don't be those guys. The other thing that I have here from this section is watch out for red flags. There are lots of times that God puts red flags right in front of us and we go plowing right by them. He gives us, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If you have people saying, hey, this really isn't a good decision, you might want to rethink this. Well, it hasn't worked for anybody else, but I'll be the one to make it work. And we plow right through. We need to watch out for red flags. And the last note that I have in relation to this, and I saw this on somebody's website the other day. Facts don't care about your feelings. Well, I don't think that's the facts don't care. We'll go way back in time. Remember the old Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. We've got a Bible that tells us, and we've got a generation that says, I don't care. And here's the deal. When God judges, he doesn't care what your feelings are. He cares what did he tell us. What does his word say? And so we need to make sure that we listen and learn, but we need to make sure that we put it to practice then. Well, let's look beginning at verse 20. Wisdom crieth without, she uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief places of concourse, in the openings of the gates, in the city. She uttereth her words, saying, How long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you. I will make known my words unto you. Because I have called, and ye refused. I stretched out my hand, and no man regarded. But ye have set at naught all my counsel, and would none of my reproof. I'm going to pause right there. We just had in the previous section, if sinners entice you, consent not. And now we have wisdom, personified, speaking, and the people are saying no to wisdom. Instead of those saying no to those that are going to lead them to destruction, they're saying no to wisdom. Welcome to 2021. And look what wisdom says here in verse 26. I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your fear cometh. When your fear cometh as desolation, and your destruction cometh as a whirlwind. When distress and anguish cometh upon you, then shall they call upon me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me early, but they shall not find me. For they that hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, for that they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, they would none of my counsel, they despised all my reproof. Therefore shall they eat the fruit of their own way, and be filled with their own devices. For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. But whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil. Just now, in reading this, I don't know if any of you saw it. Maybe you did see it and didn't have a chance to watch, or maybe you saw it, watched it. How many of you saw Sight and Sound had Noah on TV this last week? Any of you see that? Their big production, Noah, was on. I had to work that night, so probably Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm thinking. Maybe Monday, but they had Noah on this week, which is kind of their big signature calling card. And as I look at 26, 27, 28, that's what comes to mind right away. They ignore, then it starts to rain, and what does everybody want? Excuse me, can I get on the boat? And wisdom says, you had your chance, too late. And so what we find here is 20 through 23, we've got, through 33, we've got wisdom personified. And it's interesting, there's a definite turning point in the passage. The first 4 verses, 20 through 23, basically you've got wisdom saying, I'm presenting myself, I'm here, come and partake. But in verse 24, there's a change, and it almost looks cold and harsh when you read it. The second half of that, 24 to 33, I will laugh at your calamity, I will mock when your fear. Well, that's kind of harsh, isn't it? But because they said no, they had a chance. And so some thoughts on that. First of all, wisdom is not impossible to find. You know, we're talking about, okay, we have a world without wisdom, and they need it. Well, wisdom's not hard to find, but it's hard to get to. The old saying, experience is the best teacher. Well, I will agree, but your experience is my best teacher. I don't want to make the same silly mistakes. You know, if you touch the stove and burn your hand, let me learn from that, please. I don't need to touch it to realize it's hot at that point. You know, wisdom's not impossible to find, but wisdom will not be found without seeking, without searching. The problem is, the natural man likes his present state. The natural man, the unregenerate man, likes his present state. Now stop and think about that. They're living a life going nowhere fast, often feeling despair and despondency, with no real future beyond this life, but they don't want to listen to the alternative, because it would mean that they would have to change what they're doing now. And so they live by the credo that says, I'll do what I want, when I want, the way I want, and nobody, not even God, will tell me otherwise. I'm going to do what I want. I'm not going to listen. And we see that played out on the news. We see that played out in the newspaper. We see that with a world around us that, what is this? Have they gone mad? Yes, they have. And we can do all sorts of blame assigning and look back in our cultural history and say, well, it started when they took prayer and Bible reading out of the public schools. No, it didn't. It started before that, because you had to have young people that grew up that were willing to make those changes. And the fact of the matter is, honestly, taking the prayer and Bible reading out of the public school didn't take it out of the public school. The Christians could still pray. The problem was there were fewer Christians that were praying. And so what we find here is we've got an entire generation that is now 2 and 3 generations removed from having prayer and Bible reading before them on a regular basis. And so it's not that they're not Christian, it's that they've lost any sense or idea of what biblical Christianity really is. And they come to a crossroad in life, the way I penciled it down. Many a lost man comes to a fork in the road and plows straight ahead. They can go left, they can go right, and they say, I'm going this way, and try to beat their own path and run headlong into a tree. You know, God gives us road signs. We mentioned that. He gives us red flags, but we need to react and respond. You're driving down the road, you see the big orange sign, construction ahead. And if you're like most people, oh man, of course you probably just saw one 10 miles back because it's construction season, right? So you see the big orange sign, and then you see the next one that says flagman ahead. Well, what are you supposed to do when you see the flag? Just drive by at 70 miles an hour and wave? I mean, really, what are we supposed to do? It's slow down, follow the instructions. If you're out driving, and this is not to make disparaging remarks about your driving style, because I don't know your driving style. But if you're out driving and the light is turning yellow, what's your initial response and reaction? And you've got different ways. For some of you, if it's turning red, what's your initial response and reaction? It was just pink, officer. You know, how do you... And I'll tell you what my typical response is. And my older kids could probably recount this for you. This is people who think the law applies to everybody but them. Again, I grew up in a game warden's house. Okay? I grew up in the house of law enforcement. The law applied to everybody. It wasn't pick and choose who gets to do that. And there are lots of people who they come to the fork in the road and they're going to choose their own path regardless. You know, if God says it's this or this, God says it's heaven or hell, there is no third alternative here. It's not, can I get a third opinion, please? It doesn't work like that. And so we need to react and respond. Just because I need to seek for wisdom doesn't mean that it's impossible to find. Josie loves playing hide and seek. Great, she's this tall. Me, not so much. Where do I hide in the house? SeriousLike, for one, I'm too tall, and the other, I'm too old. If I get down in that spot, I may never get back out. She doesn't understand that. Her, when she was a little tyke, it was always easy to find because she'd be down there snickering, or she'd find a good hiding place and then she'd be making noises so that you would know where she was so you couldn't find. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, I got to tear the house apart to find the kid. Just because you have to search for something doesn't mean it can't be found. It just means you've not found it yet. The exception to that could be your car keys. If you lose them, you may never find them. I don't know. But seriously, searching for something doesn't mean that it's impossible to find. And finding wisdom, getting wisdom isn't easy. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. I have people, they come to work at FedEx. They like the FedEx starting pay. So they come to work. If I get new hires into my area, when I get a chance to talk to them, I want to be honest and upfront with them because most of them won't be there for day 2. No, seriously. Our turnover rate is like 120%. And we're not the only place like that. Somewhere I was just watching yesterday. I saw it on the TV or computer, or whatever I was watching, and their turnover rate's 102%. So I mean, it's not uncommon. But I tell them, hey guys, the job's not difficult. You scan a box, you load the box. However, the job is very hard because you need to scan lots of boxes and load lots of boxes. I want to be honest with them and tell them, hey, this is going to be hard work. But you know what? If you're willing to work, it can be done. We've got people that have been doing the scanning and loading job for a lot of years. Well, so it is with wisdom. Finding it is not hard, but it is difficult. It is going to take some challenge. It is going to require some work. And as I mentioned earlier, unsaved man is happy and satisfied with a life focused on self. Let's take this back. to where we started. Unsaved man is happy and satisfied with a life focused on self when he should be investing his life in the younger people around him, helping to teach and train them so that they're ready to live their lives. We've got a lot of schools, colleges, universities, grad schools, I don't care, that are trying to teach people how to make a living, and they're not doing a good job at all at teaching them how to live. So good, they go out and get a good job and make lots of money and are completely miserable day after day and die and go to a sinner's hell. Because they've been taught how to make a living and not taught how to live. And that's really what this whole first chapter is about. It's Solomon trying to teach his son how to live. And so we need to be awake and alert and use the roadmap that God has given us. We've got a Bible. Now, you can use a paper Bible. You can use a digital Bible. I've got, on that phone right now, I've probably got 4 different Bible apps. Not 4 different Bible versions, probably hundreds of those, because they all come automatically. I've probably got 4 different Bible apps on there. I just don't like reading. I don't like reading anything on there. I like to hold it in my hand. That's just the way I am. So I don't care if you're reading it on your phone, if you're reading it on your computer, if you're reading it paper in your hands. What good does it do to read it if we don't pay attention to it? We need to read it. And so just some notes in conclusion. We look at the world around us and we see all the problems. There's no question that the family unit is under attack. And as a result of that, communities are under attack, and states and governments and countries and the world is because the world has been under attack by Satan since the very beginning. And we need to take seriously our role as individuals and as family units, our role as a church. And find a place where we can get involved and help others to grow. Help them to not only be smart, but to be wise. Help them to understand discernment, how to know good from bad. Caramel and butterscotch is good, chocolate is bad. It's pretty simple. And if life were that easy, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Paychecks are good, bills are bad. I mean, if life were that simple. But life's not always that simple, is it? Sometimes it requires us to work hard. And yet, God is not trying to hide wisdom from us. And we look at these last 10, 12 verses here, and we get to that turning point, verse 24, but I have called and ye refused. I don't want to be the one that says no to God. I don't want to be the one that says no to wisdom that comes from God. I want to be the one, look at the very end of verse 33, but whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely and shall be quiet from fear of evil. Notice it doesn't even say be quiet from evil. It's be quiet from even the concerns of evil. I can live my life in peace when I've said yes to God and no to the world. When I turn things around, it's headache and heartache day after day. And so we have a responsibility to govern ourselves so that we can teach and train those around us. And it's something that we need to take seriously. Again, just because we are grown up and our kids are out of the house doesn't mean our role in the church is done. It means we have to look for a new role and invest our life in the lives of those around us. So instruction to live by. Meditation and mullings in Proverbs 1 is really what it was, but it's instruction to live by. God's given us an instruction book. We have to read it and follow it. Father, we thank you for the day and for your goodness to us. We thank you for the opportunity that we've had tonight to get into your word and to look at it.